You guys are all making me feel old. They look so young. It's great. Good for you. You know what? Everything that's going on, this is a great time in your life too. So don't let anyone get you down. You know, this is, you're going to look back, and you know what? Hardship also brings about, you know, positive memories and good memories. And you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how it affects you. And that's a good thing to learn in this business and in life in general. And I think you guys are going to be just fine.
You know, Vlas, what I wanted to say about both of you is that I personally am grateful that you're coming. And I'm grateful for the simple reason that I take this as a gesture of gratitude from you. And I think that this is like, whenever, if we can show how people can collaborate, and whenever there is a chance to actually help, this is something that I think is a lesson that is taught in life as we grow older, and we recognize this. But I think because the educational system is such that asks of very young people to be so competitive all the time, then, you know, they don't necessarily work together. And what I've been trying to do is to show how we can be stronger by actually helping each other. And so that's at the premise of even this visit, because, you know, you offered it. You said last, hey, what can we do for you? Can we come to your class? And I'm like, what?
Well, don't thank us yet. Let's wait for the thanks and see how this goes. I would say that, and yeah, you know, it is important to remember that we're all on this journey together. And Charley talks about it all the time. And as writers, you really shouldn't be competing with each other. It's not like that. In fact, it should be the opposite, where you do share whatever you're working on with your fellow writers, and you just kind of, you get better as you write more and as you get more feedback, and really use each other. Now you have a resource where you have friends and fellow students and a professor. Use those resources and get used to using them, because it will help you on your journey. And let me tell you something, there's no one in this business or any business that becomes successful that does it on their own. It's always other people helping along the way. So that's a theme that you can kind of walk away with, because that's just the truth.
And of all the disciplines, it's not necessarily true of various disciplines in our business, but writing, for the most part, overwhelmingly, writers help other writers. And we collaborate, we share scripts, we trade notes, we try and help each other. You know, that's maybe not true of, say, directing or acting or producing. Those are a little more cutthroat. But writing, truthfully, you know, there are certain parameters, but it is, of all the disciplines, it is a meritocracy. Like, people don't care where you went to school, who you know, what you do for a living. If you write something that people like, they will buy it. And part of it is that each of us can only write the stories we were meant to write. Very rarely. Now, there are times where, like, we think we have a great idea, we call our manager and we tell him, we pitch in the idea, and he's like, yeah, that's great, but they're developing that at Warner's already. And you know what? Like, at first that used to bother us, and we'd be like, oh, you know, how could that happen? But then part of it is what you learn is that, well, no, you know, that's good. We had an instinct to come up with this idea that someone's already spent money against. That means our instincts are pretty good. And now it's just time to come up with another idea. You just have to keep churning out ideas and stories, and never allow yourself to allow your heart to harden, or for you allowed to get cynical or bitter, because that is the death of anything creative. And once you feel that happening to yourself, you got to press pause and find a way to break free of that. You know, and so again, we're here to answer whatever questions you guys might have. But as Vlas mentioned, it's important to try and work together, to collaborate. We never went to film school. You know, again, our parents, you know, they worked 3 jobs to send us to college. We felt we had to get real jobs. Like, we felt we had to, you know, major in, you know, something that was like, you know, more kind of reasonable, and not do the arts. Like, that seemed, you know, almost like irresponsible. But the people that we did know that went to film school, the thing that they took most from it was the people that they got to know there, and the people that they learned to collaborate with. And so part of it is, like, you can do that just here as undergrad students, and with online communities and with people you get to know. So it's just a question of which way you want to go, which way you want to try and paddle.
And I wanted to go to film school. So I think it's great that you guys are in film school and that you're studying this because you're taking it seriously. And I feel like it's good to have an inclination and to know what you want to do sooner rather than later. But just also bear in mind that you're young and you're growing and you're going to evolve and your ideology is going to change and who you are is going to change. So one piece of advice I would give is just always be honest with yourself. Always kind of, check in with yourself. And we're dreamers. We've always been dreamers. Part of pursuing something creative, I think you almost need to be a dreamer. And to be honest, guys, like I think you have a choice. And the choice is, do you want to be true to yourself, honest with yourself? Or do you want to, kind of kid yourself or tell yourself a lie? And once you make that decision, you say, this is who I really am. I would just say that once you make that decision that you're going to be true to yourself, that's going to lead you down a path. And there's going to be adversity along the way, but at least you're being true to yourself. And there's something to be said about that because all of you are very brave to pursue something that is, in the creative field and in education in general. It's not like you're going to go to law school for 4 years and you're going to be an attorney, or you're going to go to law school for 3 years and med school for 4. So, I also just give you guys a lot of credit because I think that you're all also very brave to be pursuing this, and give yourself some credit for that.
One thing I'll just say right off the bat that, writing for features for movies and TV or animation are very different things. And we always tell people, if you don't like a movie, blame the director. If you don't like a TV show, blame the writer. Because when you are writing features, you are at the behest of the director. Whatever the director wants, that's what you have to do, even if you disagree, or else they fire you. And in features, and it's that way, but in TV, the writer has more say, and it's the director that has to serve the show and the writer. But the one thing I would emphasize before we get into any of this is that fundamentally, if this is something, if you want to write or direct or tell stories, if this is something that you can't picture yourself being happy doing anything else, only then should you pursue this. But if you think you could be happy being a teacher or being a lawyer or do something else, do that, because this is a very precarious business. There are ups and downs all the time. There is no set trajectory or path to get to being a writer. Like Vlas said, it's not like, okay, you want to be a doctor, you study, your pre-med and undergrad, and then you apply to medical school, and then you do a residency. That doesn't exist in this business. Someone asked George Lucas once, how do I make it in show business? And his answer was somehow. And that's the truth, because there isn't a direct line that you go from point A to point B. You just got to keep grinding, keep getting better at what you do, and keep hustling. Don't even try and write a script until you've read at least 100 scripts or at least 50 scripts. You can't even, professional scripts that have sold that people thought were good enough. You have to know where the bar is. So what we always say is that first you have to, if you want to be a writer, you have to be a voracious reader. It's like saying, like, I want to play basketball, but I'm not going to practice dribbling. Like, you can't do one without the other. They go hand in hand. So make sure this is something that there's nothing else you would want to do. When Vlas and I were starting, in the late 90s, we would run through a wall. There was no one that could convince us. And as hard as this business is, all the people that told us, like, hey, maybe do something else, we would not hear it. We were committed to this, and we were all in. 2, read as much as you can, and then 2, prepare yourself, if you want to write, to spend years writing. And eventually, because the truth is, the first few scripts you write, they're not going to be that good, but eventually your skill is going to catch up with your taste, and then hopefully you'll see that, and that's where you have to be humble and honest. And if you give a script to someone and they don't like it, and you give your script to 3 people or 4 people and they don't like it, you have to listen to that. They're not just trying to, like, this isn't a conspiracy against you. Because like what we saw, like it was like our 6th or 7th script, which was the one that we finally sold. When we gave that script to people, you could just see the way they spoke about it, how they were excited. We just knew, okay, we were getting there. And it took us a while for, again, our ability to catch up with our taste. We knew what we liked and we knew what we wanted to do, but it just takes time to grow as a writer. So just be prepared to put in time, to put in years, writing, working menial jobs. All my friends in college, they did on-campus interviews. They went into investment banking. They all had fancy jobs. I went back to working at the fish market I worked at in high school 3 days a week, so I could intern 4 days a week for free, at a small production company. And I was doing that, living at home, trying to make enough money to pay for my bus ticket to go to New York to intern, while all my friends were off. And I could have went and done that, and I could have went and made a really nice salary, but this is what I wanted to do. And what's funny is that now, 20 years later, they're all like, I wish I would have had the stones to do what you did. I wish I was doing something creative like you. They hate their jobs, but so it's a trade-off. But you have to understand that this is the arena you're getting into, and that it's going to require sacrifice, humility, and hard work.
And what I would add to that, and it harks back to being humble and hungry, and also too, like, once you make that decision that you're going to do it, again, guys, it's all about how you perceive things, because things are going to happen. And the professor said something that's very sage and very true. You are going to experience more rejection. So one of the things that we did, along this journey, we loved Arthur Miller's work. Arthur Miller for us is one of the best writers ever. And yeah, he's a playwright. I remember like thinking like, man, we're getting beat up here. We're like kind of Rocky Balboa. We're just getting really knocked down left and right here. And then it just felt like, we were failing 99% of the time. And then we heard this interview that Arthur Miller gave, and someone asked him, how did you write Death of a Salesman? And he goes, oh, that was easy. He goes, 98% of what I experienced before I wrote Death of a Salesman was failure. So when the time came to write about that, I knew how to do it. So I told Charlie, I said, hey, we're only doing 1% more of failure than the great Arthur Miller, so we're not doing that bad. Even though we're failing 99% of the time, Arthur Miller was failing 98% of the time. So, hey, we're not doing that bad. But these little things that can help you kind of overcome the adversity, and you look to people that are successful. When Charlie says it was our 5th, 6th script, guess who else 5th, 6th script it was that became like that script that really launched a career? David Ayer.
James Cameron was driving a truck. He was a long haul trucker, and he was writing scripts, on the weekends and when he wasn't, trucking. Oliver Stone was a cab driver. Lots of writers, they had these terrible, miserable survival jobs. Nancy Miller, who's a good friend of ours, she created 4 or 5 shows. She was working as a bartender, and she worked as a bartender at night. And then in the morning, she would wake up and write and then go bartend again. And like, you're going to do some miserable job while you try and write, and find time to write, while you try and survive and keep your head above water.
I see in your bio that you studied law at Loyola. Okay. First of all, let's just say that because you did that as well. Okay, so why?
Well, truthfully, we had been here for about 4 years here in LA, and we hadn't sold any scripts. We had written a bunch. We had a couple close calls. We had a horror script that we had a director attached to that didn't sell. And I was getting married, and I said, you know what? Like, I don't know if this is going to pan out. I don't know if this is going to happen. So I can continue to work, but I went to law school at night. I did the night program. And so I went to Loyola at night for law school. And at the end of my first year, it was actually when we sold our very first script to Universal. And part of it is I was second in my class. And so they gave me a scholarship for the rest of the way. And part of it is I love law school. Law school, all you do is you read all semester, and then you take a test at the end of the month, which is basically reading comprehension. And if you can memorize your IRAC, like law school was created for writers. Like, I loved it, and I just loved it. So part of it is like, I'm just going to finish this degree, but after that we had sold our first script, and then we just continued on.
It made you a better writer too. I mean,
absolutely,
listen, guys. Also, we're advocates for education, for education's sake. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be educated. It just opens your mind. The way Charlie would think about things and the way he would order things, it definitely helped the writing. I felt for him because also too, during that time, we were doing a rewrite for Immortals, and then he still had to go in and take his finals, and he had to memorize an 80-page outline. And it crushed me. I'm like, I don't know how he's doing it, because it was a lot. But it goes back to also what Charlie said. There is that component of you have to work hard. But I think that it was a good thing because it just, law school opens up your mind in many ways too.
Your brain is a muscle, and just like you go to the gym and you make your body stronger, you make your brain stronger when you read, when you push yourself, when you work hard, when you expose yourself to big ideas and you think deeply. When, you know, when I was in law school, all of the other kids had laptops and they had their phones. I used to just have a notebook, just listen, use your brain, get rid of all this technology. I know it keeps us connected during COVID, but listen, the School of Athens were some of the greatest minds in the history of the world. They figured out, you know, trigonometry and the circumference of the universe, and they mapped the stars, and all they had was a piece of chalk. They didn't even have paper and pens. Like, use your mind. That is the greatest gift we've all been given. And clear all the clutter and the noise out. That is the thing. And I try and express this to my daughter. She's in middle school, and like, just, you have so much noise coming at you guys. You guys need to just simplify your lives as much as possible, especially if you want to do something creative. Just like, get all the noise away. I can't wait. When I told Vlas, when we retire, I'm taking my phone and I'm throwing it in the ocean, and I never want to see an app or be, you know, reached again by as few people as possible. Like, that is the great kind of enemy of our time, all this white noise that comes at you guys.
These are ideas that, as Vlas said, that you've had in your system. They're personal. You've had in your system for a long time. You're just finding a different medium to express those and share certain themes that we could go into right now. The question is what we saw in the blood of Zeus something you had in mind when you started? Is it that, you know, because is it, you're not doing history, you're doing mythology, but you're creating new myths. How did you get to, and how much of what you deliver is personal? Is it something that you wanted to do? What are those inspirations that get you to where you are today with this latest work?
You know, and of course you have to educate yourself and live too. The more, every experience you have, man, like, you can write it. And it just gets a little weird because, like, you can be with your girlfriend or your boyfriend and you're kind of listening, well, that's a good piece of dialogue there, I'm going to jot that down, or, you know, what have you. So everything that, just live, make sure you live and really, you know, soak yourself in those experiences. I think for me, and I think it's the same way for Charley too, like, I would say Blood of Zeus is the most personal thing that we've made, and we were finally able to tell the story that we really wanted to tell. It turned out really, really well because we also had a great team. We had a great director, Sean Negoshian, but we were also involved from the inception of idea to the completion. And for better or for worse, we were able to finally tell the story we wanted to tell. That wasn't the case in the other movies, and we'll talk about the other projects when we get to those.
Well, the one thing I would say, listen, to, when you sit down and you see a movie, you're just meant to enjoy it. But what happened with Immortals, you know, I had always loved Greek mythology, and then I always loved Tolkien and those books. And when Lord of the Rings came out, I thought, oh, it'd be so cool to create a Lord of the Rings type story, but in the world of Greek mythology. And so the initial draft that we sold for Immortals was when they did the budget for it, it was $150 million. And basically the studio said, if you can get the budget to 75 million, we'll make the movie. And so part of it is Vlas and I kind of shared a look, and you know, we love Tarzan, the director, and we said, can we do this? Like, all right, let's try. And Tarzan said something that was very true. He goes, at that moment, he goes, because that script originally was much more fantastical. It was much more like the world in Blood of Zeus, and much more like Lord of the Rings. And Tarzan said, we're going to have to go from fantastical to fantastic. And there are a few moments we can keep, like Poseidon making the wave, and Ares coming down and killing everyone, and the gods and giants fighting at the end. But a lot of other stuff we had to rip out. And so part of it is that script then evolved and changed. And then what happened, truthfully, is that then there was a point where then brought in 2 other writers that worked on the script. And part of it is those other writers took the story in a different direction. And Tarzan, the director, because he's just a class act and a great guy, he would share the new drafts with us when they would come in. And we would tell him, like, we're not saying this out of, you know, being petty, or that our words are precious, or that, we feel slighted. We're just saying, we think you've made a mistake. There's all this stuff that if you ever see that on the DVD of Immortals, all these scenes of when, they show Theseus as a kid, and we told Tarzan, you're not going to use any of it. This is not going to work. And you're setting up this, Lysander character, this rival. It's not about him. We have to spend time on the antagonist, and we have to spend time with Henry Cavill, the guy who was the lead. And the funny thing is that, right before we shot, he goes, Henry's been saying the same thing, but the studio doesn't want to change the script.
We blame the studio for that. There were 4 scenes when we were on the plane going to set, and we're like, whoa, you need these 4 scenes because Henry's character started off angry and he stayed angry. There was no real growth. There was no, in the initial incarnation, he let go of his anger to overcome the adversity that he needed to overcome. And we're like, you just need these 4 scenes. And Tarzan's like, oh yeah, Henry's talking about this. This is great. I love it. But at that point, the studio wouldn't let him change. So I don't blame Tarzan for that because he wanted to do it, but he reached a point where they were like, you know what, this is it. That's it. It's locked.
And so part of it is and this is don't want to go down a rabbit hole and be too inside baseball, but when you write an original script, a new writer, if they come in under the WGA rules, unless they change more than 50% of it, they don't get shared credit. The credit stays with the original writer. So even though it's only our names as written by, there are other people that made changes to that script. And so, as Vlas said, what was nice with Blood of Zeus is what we wrote is what ended up on the screen. For better or for worse, we're not saying that, we know anything, more than anyone else. But the one thing, and this goes to the Machiavellian kind of theory, there's different kinds of intelligence. And there are people that think they're brilliant and don't need anyone else's input. And those are people I think we all know those types of people. And we've worked for directors that, because they're very insecure, they don't want their ideas challenged. Then there are people that know they don't know, and they're willing to ask people that are smarter than them. And that's the bucket we feel we fall in. We have no shame in asking someone, what is the point of hiring smart people, hiring talented people, and not listening to their ideas? And to be honest, it doesn't even matter who you are. We would all pile into an editorial suite on Blood of Zeus, and we would have the receptionist come in and everyone come in and have us all watch a cut and hear what everyone has to say. And all you can do is be open and humble. And if someone says something, think about it. There's a very famous Greek saint. He said, no criticism should bother you. Either it's true and you should learn from it, or it's false and you shouldn't care. And that's everything, Now you have to stay humble, and sometimes you'll get a note that stings, but if you're like, oh shit, they're right, then you got to step up and fix it, and make it better.
What was the experience of transferring over to television, but also animation? And if you thought there were any must-dos in writing for TV animation that would contrast with live action film?
We loved working in the longer format. One thing that it affords you is that you have more time to spend with the character, whereas in a script you have an hour and a half, 2 hours, and the challenge with that is to encapsulate a character, have a character hopefully grow if possible in an organic way. And if you can tie up some of the themes and obviously the internal and the external stakes, whereas in the longer format, you have just a little more time to do that, and you have a little more time to breathe. And that was really refreshing, and that was very enjoyable. What were you going to say, bro?
Well, a couple things. One, just off of what you just said. Also, what you're always wrestling with when you write a feature is Chekhov's gun. And the idea behind that, I'm sure you guys all know this, that, in Chekhov, he always said that if you introduce a shotgun on the wall, if he doesn't take it off the wall and use it by the third act, the shotgun doesn't need to be in the play. And so when we say Chekhov's gun, anything you introduce in a feature, you have to pay off. Where in a TV show, you have more time. You can leave threads for other seasons. So in terms of writing for TV, we love the short form. We've developed a bunch. We've gotten very close with a couple different pilots. The big thing is that if you're doing an hour drama in TV, it's about a 50-page script. If you're doing an animated script for a half hour, you're doing 20 to 22 pages. And you're never writing more than 7 pages of action. That's kind of the rule of thumb. So those are the only hard and fast rules. And now listen, I've seen this on writer Twitter, you know, and people debating these rules. There are no rules. Like William Goldman said, no one knows anything. All you need to do is write something that is interesting. You have to write something that grabs people's attention and they can't put it down. And the one thing I would stress, Olivia, since you're just starting out, and someone just recently from like our hometown sent us a script, and the first 10 pages were just terrible. And like, no matter what, as an unknown writer, make sure the first 5 pages of your script sing, and find a way to make it as interesting as possible, whether it's a character's very distinct point of view, their voice, some moment that immediately grabs your attention. Like, I can't stress this enough, because, you know, as an unknown writer, an unrepresented writer, you're either going to be submitting to festivals or querying managers. Agents forget about, you know, but so when they get a stack of scripts, make sure you grab them right from the get-go. So, you know, Vlas will even tell you, like, even when we write, I'm crazy about the opening of a script, of a feature, of a TV show, that those first few pages grab the writer. Because even when you're dealing with experienced producers, they'll tell you reading is a chore. I've never felt that way, but most people you deal with, getting them to read is always so hard. So
No one reads in Hollywood. Don't let them kid you. Listen, that's great advice. But you know what? Who's also obsessed with openings? Scott Frank, and he's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I would say this as a student, and you're starting out, because okay, what do you want? You want to do this professionally. That's what you want. So it's twofold. It's one, how do I break in? Two, when I break in, you have to stay in. And one of the things that we worked with Chris Morgan, who did the Fast and the Furious, and great guy, just a fantastic guy, fantastic writer. With scripts, it's all about structure, guys. And I know,
especially features.
Yeah, features, like if you don't have that structure and you hand that script in, the executives, they're going to be like, uh-oh, this person's an amateur. That's right away amateur. And so you need to have your at the end of Act 1, your plot point that spins you into Act 2. There's adversity along Act 2. You should have a midpoint. Chris would always have a midpoint in Act 2, and he would have like a paradigm shift, and he showed us that. That was something that we were like, oh, that's cool. And we incorporated that. And then you definitely need a low point at the end of Act 2, and then you need resolution Act 2. You got to have that. And even unconventional, I've heard it, oh, well, Tarantino, you know, doesn't do, but yeah, he kind of does. And Sid Field breaks it all down. And you guys probably got this in one of your lecture classes. Structure for features is very, very important. And it goes back to what Charlie said, the Chekhov gun. Yeah, you introduce something in page, whatever it is, you better pay it off. And that's good screenwriting. And to do that organically, that's craft. And you just get better with time. And so just bear that in mind. And then, yes, it's almost like, I always liken it to Picasso. Picasso, he was a great, great artist. He could draw beautifully. And then he went off and he did his thing. Then you can break the rules if you want to. But you first have to show people that you can do this professionally. And that means that you can give them a professional script, which is that structure needs to be there. And then sure, deviate as you like.
Oh, yes, my question was, could the story have worked if Heron was the son of like any other god? And like, why did you settle on Zeus in particular to like kind of move the story forward? And also, spoilers for anyone who didn't finish the series. My last question was like, with Zeus's death, what does like the hierarchy of Olympus look like now in the show?
To answer your question, Amber, you know, I'll give you a little quick backstory, then we'll explain why we chose Zeus. This idea originally grew out of a pitch we had where we wanted to do Greek mythology as an anthology show, kind of like American Horror Story, where each season we would take 10 episodes to tell a myth. And we would start with the story of Icarus and Daedalus. You know, everyone knows Icarus, obviously he flew too close to the sun, but they don't realize his dad, Daedalus, was like the Tony Stark of the ancient world. He was this incredible weapons inventor that, you know, everyone wanted to have him come to their city-state. And he gets accused of murder, and he and his son, they have to flee, you know, to Crete. It's this amazing story. And if you know that story, there are two other stories that crisscross it. You have the story of Theseus, and then eventually when Icarus crashes into the ocean, it's Hercules that retrieves his remains. And so that was a pitch we had. We wanted to do it live action. Our agent liked it, and he just said, like all agents do, like, what are the other seasons? And so part of the idea and the kernel, we didn't sell that show, nothing came of that. But part of what happened and where the Blood of Zeus came from is that, maybe this, sometimes, like, you don't want to reveal the magic behind the hood, but we'll be perfectly honest with you. If you know the story of Hercules, that is very much the bones of our story. Now, Hercules, his mother was impregnated by Zeus. She gave birth to twins. It was the story of, like, she was also married to a king. And what happens, and what Vlas and I always do, is you ask the question, what if? Now, in the Hercules story, his stepfather, the king, embraced his son and took him under his wing. But what if he didn't? What if he was really mad about that? And what happens to Hercules' brothers? HETFLIX, they rarely talk about him. He eventually kind of becomes like a minor hero, and he joins Jason and the Argonauts. But we said, and they become allies. But we said, what if is there some way that they could become enemies? And what if the son was cast out by the king? What if the king wanted him dead? And so part of it is that we were looking into that story for a later season, but that's where the kernel of an idea, and there's another story that we took the bones of Hercules, and if I tell you the other story, then you're really going to know where the show is going. And so I won't do that because Netflix asked us not to talk. They said, listen, like, they have a process where they determine whether they're going to order a second season. We know you guys have lots of ideas and where the show goes in 4 or 5 seasons. Please don't say anything. But the reason we picked the Zeus is because that's a tried and true. What we want to do is, when you pitch Greek mythology to executives, their eyes just kind of glaze over. Even when they tell you they love Greek mythology and they have affinity for it, they feel like there's been 10 Hercules movies. It's been there, done that. Like, so we decided the way we could kind of get around that is by saying it's a new story, but we also wanted to stay true to the tropes and archetypes of mythology. And then what was great, because even in the Hercules stories, Hera's trying to kill Hercules. She sends snakes to kill him. She's angry at him, so Zeus had the 7 kind of bastard sons that Hera was always pissed about and trying to kill. So then what that gave us is that, we have these 2 brothers that are going to become, rivals. So we have conflict on a mortal level. And then Hera and Zeus, Hera's pissed at Zeus for cheating. This is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. We have conflict on the immortal level. So then what's great is you get that thing Nolan says, if you can have 4 characters that have different points of view, but that are all interconnected, the conflict amongst them then helps just write the story itself. And so that's why we chose Zeus, and it became Zeus, because one, it was kind of true to the canon of Greek mythology. Zeus was, he was, not a great guy. And so that worked out perfect. And that's why it ended up all kind of going.
I just want to add something, Professor, because this is going to also, I think that this can be applied later, and it's advice that we can give the students. And again, because you want to make it in the business, and one of the ways you can make it is that you have a big idea, but that's not enough. You got to have you got to make it personal to you. So when it comes to Heron, so we're the children of Greek immigrants. So we've been ostracized. We've been made to feel like, and you look at us and you're like, maybe that, why, how? Well, our mom had an accent. We would bring spanakopita to the lunchroom and people would smell it and like, oh, you're weird. What are you doing? So that we're all shaped by experiences. So then you look at Heron, he's the quintessential outcast. He's ostracized. And that was something that we wanted to explore. And also he has anger. He's mad at his father not being there. And then we wanted to explore how that anger, that can destroy someone. Or if you can let it go, you can become the best version of yourself. So it was important to take that character and to personalize him. And that was someone that we just related to. And we hope by us relating to him that other people would relate to him, because we feel that everyone at some point in their life feels like they're an outsider, or they're made to feel less or to be weird. So if you can tie a big idea, which the big idea, and this is Greek mythology in itself, and then making it personal to you in some way, or at least through one of the characters, I think that'll help you.
And just to add one thing to what Vlas is saying, the perfect example, because listen, writing is a meritocracy, but you also have to write something that is commercial. Like, I read an amazing script, one of the best scripts I've ever read, about the 1918 influenza pandemic. And like, it's sold, but it's probably never going to get made because it's a very hard story to sell and make. So write something commercial, but the kind of gauntlet like that you're all trying to grasp for, the Thanos with the 5 power stones, is when you can have a high concept and the character's personal journey be one and the same. And one of the best examples, what we always tell young writers, if you watch the movie Inception, the movie Inception is about implanting an idea into someone during their dreams. And what's great is that Leonardo DiCaprio did that to his wife, and that caused his wife to go crazy and commit suicide. And now, to be returned to his kid, he has to do that to this new target. And by dealing with the past, what's great is the high concept is tied to the character's conflict. So with ours, our character is finding out he's the son of Zeus. He has all this anger about what's happened to him in his life. And by dealing with that and overcoming that and everything that he's lived into, he can finally embrace his divine nature. So what you want to try and do is that the idea, the high concept, you want to try and tie that to the character's, conflict. So that's what you're always shooting for. And those are always ends up being, the best movies, the best, samples, the best scripts, where you tie concept and character conflict together. You want everything to kind of come together as a sphere.
That's Star Wars and,
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker.
I know Powerhouse did Blood of Zeus just like it did Castlevania. Did Powerhouse or Dongwu, which was your overseas, did they do layout and sheets, or was it just direct script to storyboard?
They did layout and sheets. We sat down with Sean, the director. We wrote all the scripts. Then he told us we needed to lose 30 pages based on our budget. So we had to cut. We spent 6 weeks, which was miserable, cutting pages out of the script. But then we went through and they did sheets, and then they boarded. This may be a little inside baseball, but we took our time. And what was great is that Sean brought 20 years of experience to the table, and we just really worked on figuring out, this is the geography, these are what the characters look like, this is what the world looks like, these are how we rank the powers, these are the rules of our world, these are the rules of the characters and the monsters. And so there was just a lot of work and conversation, but that stuff was all great. We love that. That's the fun stuff.
There's a book called Circe that's very popular. I love the book. I love the poetic nature of the prose. The plot is with the plot, but I love it. So, some of it harked back to what was on that cover. We love the design and the color and the blue eyes.
The Greek key and.
Yeah, and the blue eyes hinted at, Zeus. It was one of the ideas. Initially, too, it wasn't Blood of Zeus, guys. It was Gods and Heroes. And Netflix is interesting because when they did the research, especially in Asia, Blood of Gods and Heroes was almost too general. People didn't know what it was. But what they found out was that people knew Zeus. The awareness for Zeus was very, very high. So they came back to us and they said, you have to come up with a title that has Zeus in it. So we're like, we tried a bunch of different titles and we landed on a writer friend of ours, Matt Altman, actually said, how about Blood of Zeus? Well, that's pretty good.
Wait, I see something here. So this is like blue eyes. I see that. So hold on. So are we having Huron here and here?
Seraphim, yeah.
I don't know. You've got to talk me through.
Some of these are just these are just like marketing materials from Netflix that they created.
Yes. So
now these are the first character sheets. These are actually the first draft. So basically, after we finished and completed the scripts, Powerhouse hired about 15 different designers and creators to create various looks for what the world would look like. And Katie Silva, who works at Powerhouse, she created these. And we said, no, this is the aesthetic that we want, where it is, realistic. There's a little Fran Fressetia in there, and this is the look. And so once she created that Heron and Seraphim look for the two brothers, then everyone else had to be with this aesthetic and a derivative of this.
And just to go to what Charlie's saying, there were different iterations of Heron. We ended up with that one because we like that one the most. But there was a
And even this, we aged down. Like, you know, Heron is younger in the show here, and he's not as, you know, this is a little bit older, but this was the one where we said of the 15, and if you see the end credits, you'll see these other versions of Heron at the end of the first episode. There's one where he's like a little chubbier, and there's a little one more cartoony, and we're like, no, this is the aesthetic we want.
Okay, so let's see a few more here. So you have this fantastic, oh, Hera is so marvelous.
And this is where you start to talk about ideas, and these are different variations, and they would send us these, or we would sit and talk, and you'd have to choose A, B, C, or D, or we would talk about, hey, listen, truthfully, you know, with Hera, she's more associated, you know, with peacocks. But part of it is, if we always had peacocks showing up everywhere Hera was, well, then everyone would know, oh, there's Hera. Hera's obviously watching us. So we said, listen, she's also less associated with crows and ravens, but they're more, they, you know, exist more in the world. And so it's not a dead giveaway that, you know, that's Hera. So let's use crows and ravens for her. And then we'll use the idea of a peacock in some of her outfit. And there's another dress that we ended up landing on. This was an early design, but we get that, you know, and this is for Electro.
I just want to add to the class, because we're doing this in front of all these students. Hey guys, like, this is part of the process. So this, you should be like, if you find this enjoyable and fun, you literally are sent different images and you get to say, oh, I like that outfit, or I don't like that outfit, or I don't like this, that. If that's fun for you, it was fun for us, this is maybe something for you to consider.
Yeah. Because these are, there's usually like 7 or 8 iterations before this, where, you know, like, you know, a lot of people really responded to the character of Apollo and how he's designed. So there was a design before this, and basically the director said, you know, I think he should be more like a surfer. He should look more like a surfer. And somehow from the design before this, that note made him look like this. And we're all like, yeah, that seems pretty good. That seems like a guy that, you know, soaks up the sun. Now, why surfer helped the artist get to that? I have no idea. But that's the creative process. It's not arithmetic.
Here's another thing for the students, because also writing is hard, guys. At least I think it's hard. So how fun is it? You get to write, and then you get these images sent to you. It's a nice little break, and you feel, oh, you start seeing your characters come to life. And isn't that fun? You know, that was fun for us. So it's another thing. Again, I think it helps to, in order to find out what you want to do, sometimes just to get that real life experience. And you see, oh, I like what this person's doing. I don't like what that person's doing. And so that was part of the process. So if you like kind of what you see, that's what the process was for us as writers in animation. So maybe you consider, hey, you know what? It would be pretty cool to create a show in animation. Maybe that was something you haven't thought of. And I think if you're a screenplay writer, you can be a TV writer, you can be an animation writer. I think you can do it all. So, you know, good for you guys.
And those lines don't exist anymore like they did 20 years ago. It used to be, oh, you do features, you do movies, or you do TV. So now everyone does both. And to be honest, feature writers are segueing into TV because we get treated better and the movie business is shrinking. But that's another conversation.
I agree.
Yeah, I had a question about the demons. I was just curious where that idea came from, and whether or not that exists in other Greek myths, or whether or not that was just because I thought the idea of like feasting on the giants and becoming these demons was a really interesting way to go about it. So was that like straight from the mind, or was that?
That's Charlie's idea.
That was just an idea. You know, I think that if you study history, now part of it is there's the ammonia, which are in Greek mythology, but those are more kind of evil spirits than the way we manifested them. But part of it is that evil always finds a way to reimagine itself and recreate itself. And to be honest, to be perfectly honest, part of the idea for the demons is like, if these guys are brothers, even if they're half brothers, well, how do we make them not look like each other? And like, so what we thought is that, well, if one guy's a monster, then they'll totally not think that these two guys are related. And so we like the idea, like, one, you always want formidable adversaries. And then two, we just, you know, you sit down and I don't know, you just write. And I just, this idea came out of me and I just started writing it. And I said, oh, how cool is that? Because the thing that I always loved in Greek mythology is that, like, the primordial gods were overthrown by the Titans, and then the Titans were overthrown by the Olympians. And so even though they're immortal, there's always these coups and these power, shifts. And so part of me is that I just love the idea that if there's a guy who had a terrible life and, hated the gods and didn't believe in any of this stuff, but then he finds the body of a giant. When he finds the body of a giant, then he realizes all these crazy stories are true. And if these stories are true, then that also means the current gods can be overthrown, because they overthrew someone else to take power, and the people before them overthrew their parents to take power. And so it's just this weird conflicts of ideas. And we just wanted to have cool bad guys and a way to make the two brothers different.
The executive loved that way in.
Yeah.
Loved it. Like, oh, I've never seen, here's traditional mythology. Oh, but you're coming in with this demon thing. And he's like, that's the way in. So a lot of these executives, I'm sharing it with you guys now, you take somebody that's in the zeitgeist, that has awareness, but try to come in with an original way. If you can come in, if there's an original way in, you're right away going to get people's attention. So I just wanted to mention that. Just bear that in mind. Have that, be cognizant of that. Here's something in the zeitgeist. What's the original way in? Because that'll help you sell that, big idea, hopefully, that show, that script, whatever it may be.
And Ed, read, just always be reading, because part of that was inspired by the Norse mythology. I forget what they're called, but they're like the ice zombies. They're like White Walkers, to be honest. George Martin, he got it. Like, if you robbed a treasure trove that was from a burial, these ice zombies that were incredibly smart and powerful would rise up. I think they're called like dragons, but they're basically ice zombies. And I just thought, oh, well, what was, I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah.
But if you look it up, it's in Norse mythology. I remember some artists had done these amazing paintings of them. And I'm like, oh, that'd be cool if we had some kind of monster like that in Greek mythology. So that's why sometimes you read different things and it just inspires ideas.
Sorry, I'm personally interested in arms, armor, and sort of outfits of the ancient Near East and sort of ancient Greek and Roman world. So I was wondering, what historical sources you guys used to design the costumes, armor, and outfits for the actual characters?
We had a great artist at Powerhouse, Jesse, and he did a ton of research. He did it with the armor. He did it with the actual architecture of that water fountain that you see in episode 1. That is actually the engineering behind that. That actually is a functional water fountain. So he did all kinds of research, and we would bounce off different ideas from him. And he would, it was a little tricky because we didn't really define the time period per se. So you couldn't say this was in the golden age of Greece or so, but he, it was always a conversation between him and us. What would you say, bro?
Well, the two things we told Jesse is that, like, it definitely has to be, there's got to be a lot of bronze. And this is like, after the Bronze Age. And we said everything is post-mythology. Like all the stories that we've kind of heard, we're saying like this comes after that. Yeah. But then anything from before that point in time, go nuts and do whatever you think is cool. And then he just went crazy with research. And then he would just, we would send sheets. He has sheets of different weapons, this and that. And some stuff, our director would just like, I think this is cool. Like, I don't care. I'm picking this, and as long as it didn't affect the story in a negative way, we were okay with it. But what is great, and the one thing I will say is that the world is changing, and Powerhouse, which is located in Austin, they recruit people from all over the country. And even Sean, now our director, he's working on another show at DreamWorks. They're working with crews that are in Australia, in England. There are other people that just telecommute in. So the one thing that's cool is that it's not, and we'll see what happens post-COVID, but there isn't this thing where you have to live in LA and pay ridiculous rents or live in New York and pay ridiculous rents. That's loosening up. And there are also new little hubs that are popping up where you can do this work. So Sean, if that's something you like, there are people at Powerhouse that literally all they do all day is research this stuff and then come up with designs and then put them in shows like Castlevania and He-Man and our show. And like, there's many different ways to make a living in this business.
So my question is, how did you choose to combine the Western world and the Eastern world by using anime as your medium to tell an ancient Greek story?
It's a good question. You want to say the purist, bro? I like how you say the purist with the anime.
Well,
And how,
listen, we've
yeah,
always been big
cinematic.
fans of anime, and I know some people, I've seen it on Twitter. Like, listen, anime for us has always meant 2D, hand-drawn, and from Japan. And our show is 2D, hand-drawn, and from Texas and South Korea. So, you know, if you were to say we are not pure anime, I would not disagree with you. But there's something we always loved about 2D, hand-drawn animation. And to answer your question truthfully, we always loved animation. We've always loved anime. We were just lucky that we walked into Netflix. We had a general meeting with an executive there who was looking. He said, listen, is there anything in the public domain space or mythological space that you guys might have that would work as an anime show? So this was just an idea that we had. Like I told you, we had pitched this kind of American Horror Story kind of anthology show. But in doing that, we've kind of come up with this story about these two brothers. So we were just lucky. We're like, you know what? What about this story? He's like, I love that. That's great. So I think that we were just very fortunate that just like, you know, the first person who decided to put peanut butter and jelly together, that's not something intuitively that you think goes together. But once you have it, you're like, this is amazing. I think we were lucky in the sense of taking Greek mythology, which is very well known, and putting it in this medium, because again, if we were to do this live action, it would be like a $250 million movie. I think we ended up with something that people didn't realize they wanted, but now that they have it, they like it.
One thing I would add to that for the Western influence of it, we wanted to make this very cinematic, and that's something I am proud of, because people have said that, and critics that have actually reviewed it and have, you know, interviews that we've had, they said, this is very cinematic. And we mentioned that to Sean, and I give Sean all the credit in the world. He really set out to make this as a cinematic experience as he could. So he treated it like a movie. So you see that in the reaction shots, you see it in the scope, you see that it's a kind of like an epic feel. That was all by design, and it's also in the music. So I feel like that was one thing that was an influence from you know, the Western world in comparison to, say, how some of the traditional anime is made.
And what Vlas means by that, if you watch anime, we love anime, they'll do these very static, beautiful shots that the camera just kind of pans. And if you were to pause it, the shot is beautiful. Here in the West, we kind of do the more kind of Hollywood traditional reaction shots. So it's a little bit different. I think you could do it exactly like they do in Japan, and it's amazing. That's more expensive and it's harder to do. That's also one of the reasons why we don't do it. We can't afford to. But there are differences. But, you know, we call it anime, Netflix calls it anime, because we're paying homage to this art form that is distinctly Japanese. And we're kind of using it to tell these stories. But are we pure anime? No, I wouldn't say that. But, you know, they like it for marketing purposes, and we like it because it pays respect to this genre that we always loved growing up.
Yeah, so I just sold my first writing, and then it was just treatment for this commercial, and they messed it up, of course. That's like the plight of.
They messed it up. Oh, that's good though. Good for you.
Congratulations.
Your age.
Great.
I've reached this plateau, of course, and I wanted to ask you guys if you had the chance to talk to your younger self in this kind of stage that I'm in, what would you say? And you guys know of the blacklist, any advice and insight on that would also be very appreciated.
You. What I would say, and it's easier said now, and if you can figure out how to do this, you know, hats off, but not to stress, not to worry as much as I did. I was so friggin' stressed out and worried when I was in my 20s. I'm like, you know, Charlie mentioned we were here in LA, and it was 3 years, and I was a golf caddy, and I was just struggling, and it was hard, and I had flat feet, so like it hurt afterwards. And, you know, and having had worked on Wall Street, and just, you know, we got real close so many times. You know, we had an agent at ICM that was going to take out, you know, one of our scripts, and then we never heard of her. And then we had a film that was going to be screened at the Athens Film Festival, and then 9/11 hit and everything got canceled. We were going to fly out of Boston. We were from Boston. So, but anyway, the stress and the worry just didn't help. And you know, now I've been in enough therapy where it doesn't change anything. And in fact, it's debilitating. So I would just try to find a way where you're going to work hard, you're going to stay focused, and just try not to stress or worry about it. Just really try to focus on the work and doing all that you can. you know, whatever brings you that sense of comfort, whether it's praying, whether it's yoga, whether it's whatever it is for you, find a way to recharge your batteries and to stay focused and to stay positive.
You know, I used to work with Franklin Leonard at Paramount. I know him very well. He's a great guy. There's two things that sometimes people conflate with the blacklist. There is the annual blacklist, which is the scripts that are voted as the best unproduced scripts of that year that come out every year. And if you get on that list, that's great. And that will blow open doors in a big way. There's also then the blacklist service where they review scripts and they charge you, you know, to be reviewed and to be hosted on their site. Now, there have been some success stories, but there's also part of it where like there's so many like writing contests and consultants that will charge you money. Some of that stuff is a scam. Now, with the blacklist, there are people that have posted their scripts on the blacklist and they've gotten options and they've gotten reads and they've gotten meetings out of it. So I don't want to poo-poo it. I think, you know, listen, if you can, I think it's like $100 or $50, whatever it is, you know, that's not nothing. If you can afford to do it and you have something you really believe in and you get a really good review on your first like posting, maybe consider keeping it up. But the one thing I will say is that there are a lot of screenwriting contests that will do absolutely nothing for you and you're just throwing away your money. So if you have a script you believe in, apply to the Nickel Fellowship. That's the writing contest that's run by the Academy of Arts and Science. They're the people that give out the Oscars. It's NICC, you know, Nickel like that.
Nickel. Yeah.
The Nickel Fellowship, you know, apply to South by Southwest. That's also a very reputable one, or even the Sundance Lab. And that doesn't mean there are always exceptions. There is, you know, I know there's like called like Script Pipeline, like they helped the guy that wrote the show Extant. He submitted his script there. It won that. It ended up, one of the judges was a producer who loved it. They took it to CBS and he got 4 seasons. So I'm not saying all the other ones are a waste, but just be discerning when you look at, if you're going to apply to a different writing contest, who are the judges, who runs it, what success stories have they had? I would always, if you had something really good, I would always apply to those 3. And then from there, you know, use your own judgment and do a little research.
What I see in your story, Charles and Vlas, I see that you dug very deep to say something that is very personal. I'm not sure if that's something that was part of your, you know, process of therapy that you mentioned, Vlas. But, you know, there is anger in Immortals. There is anger in Blood of Zeus. You're guys, you have brothers, you fight. I'm not sure. But what I see, and I think I wanted to kind of offer it there for Frankie, is one of the lessons that I am, that is in my path is patience. That is, you know, I'm a fast, smart, impatient person, and I'm gonna get there. And you know, it's the life comes to teach me that you know, there is a different pace here. And the story that last year saying is the story of, I mean, what I saw in Blood of Zeus is the kind of letting go of anger. And maybe that's from what I hear you saying about the Immortals. It's about that Henry character who did like, where is that? There was no outlet for that anger. So there is this building, and where is it going? And so
there's no epiphany.
There's no arc, truthfully, to that character. And what we always said, not to conflate pagan and you know, Judeo-Christian ideas, but what we always told Tarzan is that the easiest way to think of it is that he is an atheist who becomes a martyr. But we have to see and earn that journey. And that just never happened, you know. But you do write about things you know and ideas that you know about, but then you have to put them into bigger worlds and settings and genres, because again, we have lots of writer friends. And we, to be honest, Vlas mentioned this. We wrote a script about our family. There was a summer, we grew up at the Jersey Shore. Our parents had, you know, all these little small businesses. And one summer, all of this sewage and hypodermic needles from New York that they were dumping in the ocean washed up at the Jersey Shore. And so our father had a hot dog stand, didn't sell any hot dogs. The parking lot we had, nobody came to go to the beach.
We were poor. We were
poor. I mean, we thought we were going to lose our house. We had no food to eat all winter except the hot dogs from our dad's hot dog stand. So it was either hot dogs with ketchup or hot dogs with mustard. That was what we ate for 6 months. And we couldn't afford toothpaste. We had to brush our teeth with the salt from the salt shakers from the hot dog stand. Parents distinctly told us, like, listen, we can't afford to buy any Christmas presents this Christmas. We don't have any money. We chopped down the tree on the side of the house to make that our Christmas tree. You know, and so we wrote a story about that experience and that struggle. And people said, I love this. This is really well written, and I love the characters, and I love how they're chasing the American dream. But this isn't big enough. We can't sell it. And we got tired of people saying, this is well written, but it's not big enough. It's not commercial. And so part of what Vlas and I said is that, like, screw this. Everything we write from this point going forward is going to have a big commercial hook. And then you do that for a while. You sell some scripts. We got Immortals made. Great. Some other scripts, you know, got sold but didn't get made. But then what you end up doing is that you come back to the personal, but as you get better as a writer, you start to combine the big idea with the personal. Now, if you guys can do it from Jump Street, you'll save yourself a decade. You know, God bless, go with God. We hope you can do it.
No, there's just two quick things I want to add, because I do want to tell you how we broke in, and that's going to spill into this. But going back to that script, you get a lot of rejection, but you also get some good little news along the way. I distinctly remember we were in our other brother's house in New Jersey, getting the call for that little script. It was by a manager who'd been the head of literary at William Morris, and he said, "This is the best script I've read in 10 years." And it just felt so good. It felt like you were just like, "Hey, I'm not delusional," you know. And granted, he was a manager at the time, and he gave it to the agents at William Morris, and they're like, we love it, but it's too small, and it's everything that Charlie said.
And we didn't sell it.
And we didn't sell it. But that felt good. Like, that really felt good, guys. And sometimes you need that little shot in the arm when you're getting the rejections. You know, you just need someone to say, hey, you know, I really like this. Someone that can potentially get you a career, can change your life. It just is nice to get that. And so what happened in terms of how we broke into the business, we did write. Charlie had that great big idea. We tied the personal to it. And
this is a heist script. The first script we sold to Universal was a heist movie.
It was a heist script. We then, that manager slipped it to a young agent at William Morris. He loved it. He gave it to the senior agents. They loved it. They go, hey, this would be great for 50 Cent. 50 Cent was at the height of his power at that time. So his popularity, and 50 Cent loved it. And then they said, okay, now we're gonna take this script, but we have a very good relationship with Universal. Fast 3 had come out. It's kind of didn't do as well as they had hoped. This could be maybe their next car franchise. So they said, we're gonna give this to the executives we know, the producers we know. At that time, it was Mary Parent and Scott Stuber at Universal. They read it, they loved it. They brought it to an executive, he loved it. He goes, what do we need to do to buy this script so that you guys don't go out with this to the town? And they gave him a number, and that was a number. And that's how we got invited to the party. That's what kind of brought us in. And that's, from then on, we just, you know, worked professionally from there. But it was writing something with a big idea that had a personal component to it. And we got it to a manager. You're not going to be able to get things to an agent nowadays. Managers are more willing to read your stuff, try to write something, get it to that manager, and hope that then that manager then can solicit that script. God willing, sell the script. It's harder now to sell a script, but at the very least, it can get you some attention. It can maybe get you on the blacklist, and that can kind of get your career started.
So the two things I'll just add to that is just write and make sure you have something that is worth sending to people, because often if you get someone that's willing to read your script, if they pass, it's very hard to get them to read another script, unless sometimes you say, hey, I like this, but it's not big enough. Whatever you have next, send me. But the way you find these people, when we were coming up, there was a book in Barnes & Noble. I don't even know if you guys go into Barnes & Noble anymore, but it was called the Hollywood Creative Directory, and it had a list of all the agents and managers in town. Nowadays, you guys can sign up, you know, share an account amongst a group of you for IMDb Pro. IMDb Pro, it's like $79 a year. And if you go on there, find a movie or TV show that you like, click on the writer, and then you press the contacts button. And on the contacts button, it will list their agents and their managers. Look at those managers. They'll have a contact number, an email, and you can start off by trying to query those managers. That's the best route to go. Either through a really good contest like the Nickel Fellowship, or reach out to managers. Managers will still accept unsolicited work from unrepresented writers. You might have to sign a waiver saying that you won't sue them, you know, and that you're giving them the right to read the script. That's okay. Feel free to do that. But that's the way to do it. Write something that you think is good enough now to send to people and to be taken, you know, seriously, professionally. And that's how you can find ways to reach out to them.
2 more ideas too, just because again, it's important. We just wanted to hear this when we were like, how do we break in? How do we break in? Another way to maybe break in, it's harder to get these jobs, is to become an assistant in a show. If you can become an assistant on like whatever favorite TV show you have, that's a way, because as an assistant, you get to meet everyone, you get to, and then you have like, hey, how about reading this? Once they know you, once they have a face, it's hard to get those jobs. I would even say, this is just me, if you can't get to be an assistant on a show, try to be a production assistant on the production side of that show, and you still get to meet. Maybe you're writing, maybe you're driving the showrunner into work, or you're getting to know someone that works there. That's another way. And if you can like just again put a face to a script, and then when you have that script and it's ready, you can give it to them, because it's 2 parts. It's getting to a point where you're good enough, professional enough, where you have something that merits attention, and then it's about access. It's not really as nepotism. Let me tell you something, people. It's not as much in Hollywood, yeah, because like even if someone's like, say, director's son or showrunner's son or daughter, you know, write something that's you know, I don't know, they write something, and then a studio or a network's looking at this like, are we going to put 100 million into this? Because you have to solicit the idea, you have to solicit the show, and if you don't get the eyeballs, they don't care who you are, off you go. So it really, Charlie says it's a meritocracy. Writing is a meritocracy, and he's right.
As long as it's commercial, though, because sometimes we'll have people that be like, listen, it's a great script, but you know what? This very narrow story about, you know, something very small, you're going to have a harder road. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value, because some projects still get made because it's a great story and because an actor wants to play that part or the director wants to tell that story. The other thing that you guys should consider as another potential avenue is to try and go work at an agency. So many people, if I could go back and rewind the clock 25 years, I would go start at an agency mailroom, work as an assistant for 2 years, because what you do there is that you get to learn who everyone in town is. You get access. When I worked for this producer in New York, I would bring home scripts from the office. I would bring home the dailies from the movies that you know he was filming, and we learned you have to expose yourself to this material and to these things. But if you work at an agency, now listen, that's a very hard job. I worked as an assistant. I had staplers thrown at me, cell phones thrown at me. Like, hopefully most of that stuff now is kind of poo-pooed upon and is not as you know, if you guys have ever seen the movie Swimming with Sharks, that was what we grew up in, and how assistants were treated. Now, I don't think you can do as much of that stuff. But if you work at an agency, what happens is that if you do write by an agent, they will make sure you end up with a good job, either working for a really good writer or at a production company or at a studio. And almost the majority of the people we know that started at an agency are now really high-level executives or producers or helping run shows. That's another way to go, and just to expose yourself to kind of learn where you might want to fall in the business. And 2, there's so many different ways you can work in this. You can work in casting, you can work in production, you can work in development. You know, we wanted to write, and that's what we wanted to do, but working in some other jobs helps you kind of get a feel for how the industry works and what different jobs are out there. But if you want to just write, you don't have to do that. I think it's better just to have a job that gives you more time to write. If you work as an assistant, you're going to work 60, 80 hours a week. When I worked for Rudin, I would work 100 hours a week. Floss will tell you, I would leave the apartment at 6 in the morning, come back at 11, and just collapse, and then start all over again the next day, you know, and work weekends and do all that.
Because also remember, Charlie had mentioned early on, I don't know if you guys, you know, remember this, but he said he worked for a small production company. Well, guess what? That small production company had that relationship with that William Morris agent, who was the head of literary at William Morris. Then that guy became a manager. And that was the guy that we slipped it to, because Charlie worked for his boss, said, hey, can you just read this script for
this young kid, from this assistant who's making $500 a week.
Exactly. Because now the challenge with an agency is that you're going to put in those crazy those crazy hours, and you still need to be able to write. But that's the beauty of film school. Do that writing now. Try to get as much of that writing as you can. Try to put those 10,000 hour, we believe in the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. You just got to keep putting the work into it. So try to do as much of that as you can now, so that when you do go out, maybe you can get a job at an agency, still try to write as much as you can, but you've done a lot of that writing and you're there for maybe a year and a half, so you can get that connection that you can slip the script to.
Hi, I'm Cole. I'm a film student here at LMU. And I just want to know a little bit about like the early production track of Blood of Zeus, like how it was developed and like how that was different than like the development stages of like your earlier projects, like securing funding and like soliciting the script around, like just how has that changed from like the earlier stages of your guys' career to now?
Well, with the Blood of Zeus, basically what happened was we had a general meeting, which is just, there's nothing on the agenda except sitting down, talking with an executive. And what you do is you bounce a bunch of ideas off of them and you just see what they respond to. We always say you have to have arrows in the quiver. You have to have 4 or 5 ideas that, we're bouncing around, and you pitch them to the exec. And if you see them spark to it, then you have to like flesh that idea out more and come back and pitch that to them again. So with Blood of Zeus, we mentioned the idea to John. Right away, he loved this idea about the 2 brothers and the demons and all this, and Hera getting revenge. So he said, okay, can you just write out some pages for this? And so what we did was we wrote we sent him like 6, 7 pages. He read it. He's like, this is great, guys. I really like this. He goes, this is the deal. This is what I'll do.
There's an original way in. Remember that. We said that with the demons. Oh, that's an original way into Greek mythology. What else you got?
He basically said, if you write the first episode, the pilot, which is 20 pages, and then a 10-page Bible explaining the arc of the first season, if you do that, and I read it and I like it, I promise not only to buy it, but I'll make it. And so part of it is then Vlas and I just kind of, we shared a look and we said, listen, we love this story, we believe in it. If we don't put in, listen, a lot of what you do is speculative sometimes as a writer. If we don't take the time to write this script and write this Bible, we should just hand in our WGA cards, our Writer Guild of America cards. This is too good of an opportunity, because so many other times, you'll sell a script and you spend years in development. He's saying he'll buy it and he'll make it. And John meant it. So we then took the next, 6 weeks, we finished the pilot. We wrote out this 10-page Bible that kind of arced out where the season would go, which completely changed. We totally changed the last
even longer
three
than 10
episodes.
pages. It was like, that would be like 18.
It was 15, maybe it was 15. And we had asked for 10 episodes, to be honest. And so then we submitted that, and then John read it like 4 or 5 days later. And he basically sent us a text. He goes, I love this, I want to buy it. And that was it. And then we were off and running. When you do features, there's 2 types of jobs you can get in the feature world. You can either write something on spec, which again means you're writing on speculation, which means no one's paying you. You're just taking your time to sit down and write this, and that you hope then when you write it, you hope that your reps like it, and then you hope that agents like it, and that you can get elements attached so you can try and sell it. Or you can do what's called open writing assignments, OWA, which means like, okay, Warner's has optioned this book for Harry Potter. When they option a book, they then put out the word to all their agencies contacts, and they say, who would be right to adapt this book? The agents then submit lists of names. Warner's will then say, okay, these 8 writers from WME are approved. These 8 writers from CAA are approved. And then this is the way writers audition. You go in and you pitch your take. We open up and you do a 25-minute, verbal presentation. And it's how you try out. And then they pick one person to then write the project. So what Vlas and I always stress is that when you're a writer, there is no paycheck every 2 weeks. The money comes in big chunks. So our most valuable asset is our time. We have to decide what ideas we want to focus on, what open writing assignments we want, because too, you're going against other writers, and it's not competitive in the sense that you just have to decide, do you want to spend 3 weeks working on something? We always ask, how many other writers have been approved for this? How many other pitches are they taking? And then we have to decide, do we like this idea enough where we're going to spend 3 weeks to try and get this job? And sometimes you get an OWA, sometimes you don't,
And just one thing I want to add, just because I think you guys will like this story. So remember that first script that we sold, that they said, hey, this might be the next, car franchise for Universal. Well, guess what happened? The first director they went to, he was this director that had all this heat from Sundance. He loved it. You know, we were moving full steam ahead. Our senior agents were like, posters on the wall, guys, posters on the wall. They're going to make this movie. It's going to be their next car franchise. Well, the director starts trying to change the script. He butts head with the producer fires him. Then, before we try to get another director, Vin Diesel calls Universal and says, you know what, why don't we just try to do another Fast and Furious? We'll do it before. We'll just see how it goes. Paul Walker.
And I'll get everyone to come back. We'll bring the whole cast back.
So they say, okay, let's try that. And then it became 4, 5, 6. And then that was that. We were on the back burner and we never got the light of day. But what did it happen now? Netflix actually has bought it out of turnaround, and now it's at, you know, Netflix. So hopefully they'll make it.
And the other thing I'll add is that we had sold a heist script, and basically we found out that they were remaking Clash of the Titans, which is one of our all-time favorite films. Like we love that movie, the original with Harry Hamlin. And so we asked our agent if they would put us up to be considered for that job, for that open writing assignment. And they said, no, you guys don't have a world building sample. We want, and we're like, what are you talking about? We're Greek, we love Greek mythology. And that's the reason why we wrote Immortals, because we're like, screw this, we'll show them that we can write in this world. And then we ended up competing with Clash of the Titans about which movie would get made first. So
just one last thing, sorry. Like, I love when Charlie said that, because you know what, you got to prove yourselves.
Yeah.
And don't ever be afraid to prove yourselves. And here's the other thing. We mentioned Nancy Miller. She created Saving Grace. We loved her. She's great. She said this, and I believe this. You know, once you decide you're going to do this, you will make it. If you're tenacious and you have some talent and you work hard and you don't give up, you're going to find a way. So just remember that too.
I mean, I keep on saying, I told you the other time that, you know, I still don't know what I'll do when I grow up.
Good for you.
You know, because you keep on trying certain things, and if you keep on pushing the limits for yourself, then you know, in the end, you'll find something that is very true to you, but you will also be not, as I like when you say you're not too precious about your words. You allow people to give you feedback, and then you change and you adjust and you change. And I think that's something that that comes with humility, because you said to me privately at some point last time that you know of people that are very, very successful writers, but they were so protective of the work. They weren't changing much. They didn't want to share it. And then, you know, it's dead in the water, because you cannot be in an industry where you actually, you know, you have an idea, but then it's 170 million. I mean, you know, it's a collective, it's a collaboration. You can't have a brilliant idea. That doesn't exist anymore, a single person. You're talking about a team.
That's
right?
If you want to write something and have it remain unchanged, write a blog. That's the only way that can happen. Like, there is no, that doesn't exist in our business. And the one thing that Frankie had asked, and I think it's something we just learned, and you grow and you mature over time. We used to put pressure, like, this is going to be, because we said, like, when you sell your first script, we're like, in 5 years, we're going to work our ass up and we're going to get a movie made. And we would try and force it, like, this one has to go. As soon as we let that go, and we just said, you know what? Every day we're going to wake up, we're going to work hard, we're going to try and do our job to the best of our ability. That's when things started to happen. And that's when things started to really click. And then we also learned to be better about taking notes and to be more clever, because there was times where we'd be like, no, screw that, I disagree, they're wrong. And part of it is you have to learn to just be collaborative, and you have to learn that you can't make everything come down to one thing, or else you will go crazy, you will explode. And so when you take the point of view that, listen, we're going to work hard. And what's great is you always have the version you wrote. And then if you rewrite it, it's not like that version disappears and magically goes into the ether. Like, you'll always have that version. Try what they're asking. Try a different version. Listen to the notes you're taking, and just try and land at the best version of this story. But that only happens when you are willing to step back and listen and not put pressure on yourself, and be humble and be open to criticism.
Well, Professor, just to speak to that one moment, because she brought up a very good point, and this is something that I feel we need to share with you guys. She was talking about an individual that we knew was brilliant and was a great writer, and never made it because he was uncomfortable sharing his material because he was afraid of what people were going to think. And that killed him, that suffocated him. you can never, don't ever put yourself in that position where I was like, oh yeah, you should read it in. If I look like a jackass or an idiot, whatever, I don't care. Give me the feedback. But that willingness, and I had a friend that did it too. And he did a film with, you know, John Malkovich and Colin Hanks and Tom Hanks. But you have to be willing to share your material and not be afraid of what people are going to think of you, and not be afraid of that criticism. That's very important in your growth. You know, that's how you're going to grow as a writer. And also too, to be honest, we were much better writers by the time it came to write Blood of Zeus than we were when we wrote Immortals. We just kept getting better. And guess what? The friends that we have that are in this business, I would say, bro, too, that they all have gotten better. Everyone gets better. I can't think of someone that's gotten worse as a writer and is still in the business. I guess, you know, maybe those writers aren't in it anymore. So just be open to sharing your work, and don't be too precious about it, because that's how you'll grow as writers. And you need to grow, and you always need to be growing and learning.
And the race is long, and you know, it's not make or break on one script, one day, 1 year, one decision. It doesn't work that way.
Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm a junior Spanish major. So my question is, I was wondering, from your childhood experiences growing up in a Greek American household, so what aspects of your childhood and your family's culture did you think influence your creative process in making Blood of Zeus?
We spoke about it, you know, briefly before. You know, all of our experiences shape who we are, and I feel that all of that funnels into the work somewhere, somehow. You know, one of those things, again, was this whole bit about just feeling like an outsider, not feeling that we quite fit in. And that was something that was, you know, in the character of Heron. And, you know, what I would add to it in terms of the anger, and the professor had brought it up before, and a critic had seen the film, and I love what she said. She goes, listen, she goes, I'm a woman, I'm Mexican, I'm in Texas. I feel marginalized and I feel minimalized at times, and it gets me angry. It gets me really angry. But after I saw the show, I realized that I have to be like Heron, where I can't let that anger consume me. I have to use that anger in a way that's positive, in a way that I can become and evolve and be the best version of myself. And that just made me feel really good. And that was something that there was times when I was growing up, I was just angry and I was impatient, and I, you know, had some of these things. And when you can tell a story and it can kind of resonate with someone in a positive way, I think that's really cool. And that's, you know, something that, you know, we just both felt so good when she had said that. And, you know, the other personal story that we had that Charley mentioned, it was very personal, and it was about, like, you know, at that time, you know, you look at your parents and sometimes you see the flaws that they have and the mistakes that they made, and you're angry with them. And then, you know, the main character, it's a coming of age piece where she sees these things in her parents, but then she ends up recognizing all the good things that they've done, and she accepts them in a way. And I think there's, again, here's the advice I would give: make it as personal as you can. Just like in Big Fat Greek Wedding, that was a very personal story for Nia when she wrote it. And in being personal, believe it or not, it'll be more relatable. It's when you're general that it's not that good. When you're specific and personal, it appeals, believe it or not, to a larger group of people, in my opinion.
And part of the one thing I'll add is that, like, you know, you are shaped by your experiences. You're shaped by your childhood. You know, again, we might have struggled financially. Our family might have been poor, but our parents, they gave us a lot of love and they gave us a lot of support. And we were kind of, the one thing that I think, though, is that you always have to be aware of where you're coming from, because we sold this revenge script to Mandate, which is now owned by Lionsgate. And the executive who read it, he goes, like, you know, the one thing is, like, I don't get it. Would the son really, like, be willing to die to make things right for his father? And, like, Vlas and I, we'd die for our families 100. I would die for my brother. He would die for me. And, like, but part of it is, in this modern world, this idea of self-sacrifice, you know, maybe isn't, you know, people don't really buy it, or they maybe feel it's from a different time or a bygone era. And so part of it is, like, I told Vlas, like, part of the reason why we like writing in the mythological space is because we were raised with a very kind of old school mentality, which may not mesh with the modern world. So better to write characters that live their life by a code and have certain beliefs, because that's how we feel and that's who we are. And you know, again, we would die, like, you know, to help our parents. We would kill everyone in a room if we had to for our parents' sake. But to this executive, he's like, well, no, that's ridiculous. Just because his dad owes money to the mob, he shouldn't have to deal with it. And like, we would never think that. Like, we would. And so obviously we write characters that, you know, we relate to more often than not. So part of it is like, just know that your background will influence you, and just listen, because, you know, there are times where it's served us. We always say Blood of Zeus is not our story, it's Greece's story. But in this other script, you know, it wasn't helping us the way we were raised and the way we think. And you know, you modulate it and you take the notes, but in the end, you are who you are, and that comes out in your scripts.
And just one last thing, I think everyone has a story to tell. So I would encourage you to delve into your personal experiences. That makes you who you are. And I feel that's important. And guess what? Let's not just think of what, you know, Charlie and I have to say. Look at Martin Scorsese. He writes for himself. He writes something that moves him emotionally. And he hopes that by doing that, it'll affect an audience. And I think that's what you guys should do. Write something that moves you. Write something that is personal to you. If you can tie it to Big Idea, I gotta say, because I want you guys to make it in the business. You know, if you can tie it to Big Idea, all the better. But, you know, at the end of the day, you have to like it. It has to move you. If it doesn't, guess what? It's not going to do that for anyone else.
So I really relate to what you've been saying about finding whatever way to end up in the industry, because I'm a film major and a theater minor, and right now I'm getting into voice acting.
Great.
So I wanted to know, what, as the creators of an animated show, what's your relationship like with your actors, and how does that differ from live action? And for all the shows you've made and the movies, how much do you talk to your actors about understanding the mythical background of their characters?
It's a great question. I love that you're a theater major. We love theater actors. I think it's great. And some of the best writers were actors, and some of them, you know, had that theater experience. I think theater experience is a great experience to have. I mean, you know, Tarantino was an actor, you know, so I feel like that's a really great, you know, I think it's, and we studied, you know, with some really great professors, you know. I studied with William Esper, who studied with Sandy Meisner, and Sandy Meisner obviously is, everyone knows Sandy Meisner in the acting realm. And with regards to working with our actors, it was very important for us. Again, we treated this, we try to treat it as much of a movie, in that we wanted there to be a certain emotional truth. We wanted, instead of like actors like indicating or acting, we really wanted them to view their characters, really live in those moments. And we shared that with the cast. And guess what? A lot of the cast that we had, they were big theater actors. So right away,
they all came from the theater.
Yeah, they almost all came from the theater. So it was always about, like, you know, again, just try to keep it as real as we can. And that was the mandate. And that was what we shared with Sean and and with Meredith Lane, who was the acting
casting director and voice. She was the voice director.
Voice director. So the relationship with the actors was a very good one, where we were able to communicate to them, this is what we're looking for. We want to keep the emotional truth, you know, at a very high level. That's paramount from us. And that was communicated to them from us and from all the other people that we worked with. And I think they did a good job in delivering, you know.
But we should tell Garrett that it's very different working on a movie and working on an animated show. When you work on a movie, you can have these long discussions and you can talk about motivations and the character and backstory. More often than not, what happens with animation is that, you know, after someone gets cast, they get sent the scripts, and then basically, you know, you're afforded a chance. We wrote these short little kind of basically emails, kind of explaining the dramatic construction and the intent of the character. But then normally, like with animation, you'll get the scripts, you'll show up, you'll talk to the writers and the director for like 15 minutes, and then you go in the booth. Like, you have to have made your choices. We tried to steer them a little bit, kind of explaining, well, okay, So for Hermes, for example, in mythology, Hermes was a trickster and always messing up. And at that time, he just wanted Zeus to elevate him to the pantheon. But then he went and he stole Apollo's cows and he got in trouble. And Zeus sat him down and said, listen, if you want to be elevated to the pantheon, you have to be responsible. And you have to do what the others ask of you. And you have to do what I ask of you. And so all we told Matthew Mercer is that in our story, the Hermes we see has already bought into Zeus's speech. So you don't have to play the trickster part, play the dutiful son part. And like, that's it. And then he went and did the rest. Like that was literally, you got the same direction and input that he got. And then he just went into the booth and spent 2 days recording his lines. So, you know, it's not like in a TV show or a movie where you're going to have table reads and then discussions and you can, you know, it's much quicker in animation because the budgets are small, to be honest. That's the really truthful answer. So you have to break down, do the homework when you read the script, whatever direction you get, take that, and then you just got to make bold choices and go.
That's 100% true. Just very quickly, Grace Randolph did an interview with the cast.
Yeah.
You guys should check it out if you're interested in becoming a voice actor, because some of the insight that the actors gave, I think you guys will all find to be very, very helpful.
Yeah. And Matthew Mercer encouraged everyone to take theater courses. That's what one of his answers to people wanting to get into voice acting. So
it's very hard. You go to a booth. There is nobody in front of you. You have to imagine and create the voice. I mean, it's insane. It's so hard.
You have to create the circumstance. Now, we tried to arrange it where they could read the lines with other cast members, but that wasn't true of all scenes. So then you're reading the lines with the casting director. And so like, I think what they do is incredible. Like Vlas and I were just in awe. They were so talented, but you create this reality that is not true. And you try and live in those moments. And that's what you got to strive towards, Garrett. And, you know, but that's a great thing. That should be exciting, you know, hopefully.
I was just wondering if you guys had any more plans to do any more hyper-realistic films and do them the way you intended as writers, since you touched upon feature films are kind of hard to do that nowadays.
You know, listen, Sam, the honest answer is that it's been nice whenever we've developed TV and working in anime now, you know, the past, you know, year and a half, 2 years, it's so nice to like, you know, be able to have some say in what the thing actually becomes. Like, you know, Vlas and I have said, if we did animation and TV for the next 15 years, that'd be fine. Now, that said, we wrote a feature that Derek Kolstad, the writer of John Wick 1, 2, and 3 is producing, and we're out to a director right now. So there's part of us that is always drawn back, like, you know, I guess, you know, features are like an abusive relationship that we can't seem to break free from. Not to make light of anything like that, but, you know, really truthfully, we should just do TV and animation. And we're probably going to lean more into that. But I'm sure we'll still, every once in a while, get pulled back into features.
You know, it comes down to the story. You know, there's some stories that are better suited as features. There's some stories that are better suited as shows. There's some stories that are very personal. Like the personal one, for me, what it's always been about, it's more than anything, is like, does this story move me emotionally? And I'm a sucker for that. If it does, you know, and if it's an anime, you know, and that was like something that, you know, to be honest with everyone, was a discovery process, and it was a surprise, you know, to see the anime, and it moved me emotionally, and that was very gratifying, because as a storyteller, that's what you want to do. You want it to move yourself emotionally, again, going back to the Scorsese thing, and then you hope that it moves an audience, you know, the same way it moved you. And so for me, that felt so good. So whether it's anime, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a movie, if we're afforded to do that, I think it's harder, as Charlie's saying, to do it in the feature world without being the director. You know, if we were to tell that personal story of ours, we would hopefully, you know, say it as directors. I think we would be able to be afforded that opportunity. But, you know, maybe if there's a really good working relationship you have with the director on the feature front, where you really kind of together collaborate in the way we collaborated even with Sean on this anime, and, you know, we're all on the same creative page, I could see it happening. I think it's more difficult to happen in the features for the reasons we mentioned, but it's always a possibility. But in terms of whether it should be a movie or if we're going to do another movie, it just depends on the story. We love the spec that we have now. We think it could be really cool. It has some of that hyper stylized component to it that you enjoy. So there's the possibility it might. We hope it comes into fruition, and we'll see, you know. And it's like Charlie said, just trying not to force things, just trying to be honest with ourselves and like work really hard. And then, you know, sometimes the thing that you didn't think would sell sells, and the thing that you thought for sure would be a slam dunk doesn't. So, and you just keep trying.
You know, Sam, there's a Medusa idea that we have that we think could be a really cool animated, you know, show, but it could also be a really cool movie. And you know,
You would
when and
love
where-
that. That would be
Yeah.
perfect for Sam.
Yeah.
I like that one.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
we told you that.
I think I want to wrap it up by really, really thanking you both. This has been such an educational experience for us all. And yes, let's all applaud with this little thing there, but I want to applaud this way. Thank you so much. I don't know if you have any questions for us, but I speak for my students and for myself. That's been such an honor and a pleasure and an educational experience. So I really do thank you.
Thank you. And I would just say, you know, just it's easy for people to be negative, but just stay positive. Stay positive. You can do it. And our thoughts govern our lives. And we just have to and listen, if you can figure it out, tell me how to do it. But you know, definitely try. At least try to be as positive as you can. And I'd be just curious, and I don't know, probably don't have time for this, but I'd be curious, what do you guys want to see more of if we were afforded a season 2? But I think it might be too late to ask that question.
No, I wanted to ask that myself, but you know, because I saw in the first series that there are moments where I'm saying, so what's going to happen with this character? And then I heard or I read some interview that you gave, and you said, well, you know, since we had to get rid of 30 pages, we didn't have the backstory of certain characters. So hopefully we'll have some of that coming up. And that's you know, the result of having people influence the final product. You know, we can have what you wanted, but you said you wanted 10 episodes, you got 8, you know. So people, students, give some feedback. What do you want to see in season 2?
Dionysus would be cool.
Ah, good.
You know, Frankie, we had more for Dionysus, and I'll never forget, we had 3 scenes with him and we cut him out. And Meredith, who was our casting director, said, oh, thank God. She goes, guys, you have so many speaking parts, like one less, great. And then we like cut like another god. But like, you know, he's a fun character, or we thought like the characterization we had for him is fun. Yeah. And we hope we would, you know, definitely, if we get a season 2, you'll see more of Dionysus, God willing.
I'm sure this is something that you guys have thought about a lot, but I'd love to see more backstory or plot lines for the 2 smugglers and for Alexia, because they've got some really interesting stuff going on that only barely got touched on.
Thank you. Alexia was the one that killed us. That was the one, we had the backstory and it was in there, and then we just ran out of real estate and we had to cut it out. That one hurt.
We even offered to put in our own money to get some of her scenes back in.
Charlie
Vanessa was like, guys, like, just let it go. Like, it's going to throw off our post-production schedule. We won't meet our delivery date. You know, that one with Alexia killed. And our director, Sean, he's like, I want more of Evios and Kofi. And Kofi, you'll appreciate this, Professor. Kofi was inspired by a true story of a slave from what is now modern-day Ethiopia. He was a slave in an Athenian silver mine, and he won his freedom through an athletic competition and eventually became a citizen of Athens. And that used to happen a lot. People would move through this kind of hierarchy. And so we're not saying that is Kofi in our movie, but in our show, but that's why we called him Kofi, to kind of pay tribute, and why we told the actor to use a North African accent, because he was from a territory that is now modern day Somalia. But our director, Sean, he's like, I want to see more with them. Like, what do you guys have in store? And it's just like, we have other stuff too with them that we lost, bro, in 6 and 7, you know. But
yeah. He's so talented too. Both actors that play those, they're so talented, you know, and he's in Castlevania, he's in Castlevania. He's so, I mean, we just need more for this guy. And, you know, that was hard. That was the biggest challenge, is again, just paring it down.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. I don't know. I like the idea, the backstory for coffee. That sounds awesome. I have, you know, with my ancient Greece class, we're doing about metics, the immigrants and the slaves, and how they can maybe become Athenian citizens. So that's interesting to have it in. And also, you know, the kind of ethnicity and race divisions there were very, very different to now. So there were other things that were at issue, but are you going to have a lot more of that underworld?
Oh yeah, I mean, 100. I mean, again, Netflix asked us like not to speak about it, but 100%. There's a reason why that's a long panning shot. And if you know your Greek mythology and you know what happens in there, you're going to see all of that. That stuff is so fun. We can't wait to dive into that. And, you know, Professor, we're very proud that, you know, Greece, you know, invented democracy, quote unquote, invented it. But one thing, because there's a Leonidas story that we would love to tell as an animated show. But part of the reason why the Spartans could be soldiers all day long is because they had helots, they had slaves farming. That's why they could go and just train and be soldiers all day. You know, it's part of the story we always sometimes kind of, you know, skim over.
But it's interesting on how the stories or the ideas of what Greece is travel in the world. And so whatever you do, make us proud.
Absolutely. And the other advice to you guys, because especially if you're writing a movie, but it applies to TV as well, is that because this is an era of peak content and peak TV, and there's so many movies and TV shows out there, people want big ideas. Now, obviously, none of us own the rights to the, you know, Marvel catalog or DC catalog, but look for things in the public domain that have awareness, and then try and find a way to spin it. Snow White and the Huntsman, we know, you know, the manager that represents that writer. That's a great idea. Oh, everyone knows the story of Snow White, but let's tell it from the huntsman's point of view. Something like that. If you're looking for a way to kind of have something that cuts through the clutter, look into the public domain and look for a way to spin it. You know, do the Wicked thing where, you know, oh, all of a sudden the villain, the known villain is actually the hero, and we're going to flip it on its head. Do that for something in the public domain.
Captain Hook's backstory? Captain Hook. Everyone knows Peter Pan and Captain Hook. Oh, what's his story?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one bit of advice. Like, you know, again, it's great, write something personal, but if you can find a big story and find a way to make it personal to you, it'll just increase your chances of selling it. And in the end, we always say, you write it. When you write it, you hope you sell it. When you sell it, you hope it gets made. When it gets made, you hope it makes money so you can do it all over again. And that's the loop that you're constantly chasing.
We're very, very happy for you. So keep on doing well. That's, you know, I really am smiling from my heart. So keep on doing well, guys. Thank you.